In the new book, you have a small section talking about oxytocin being this reset balancer of other hormones, being basically at the top of the cascade and calming down sex hormones, cortisol. So talk more about what oxytocin is and then ways we can boost that.
Yeah, I love this, and I love where you're putting it in the conversation. So thank you for that. I think we need to bring oxytocin back. I think human health would massively improve if we understood the power of oxytocin. So in every book I've written, I write about something called the hormonal hierarchy. And the whole hormonal hierarchy is that hormones don't all have the same influence on our body. So the bottom of the hierarchy are these sex hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. If you want to balance those hormones, the hormone you want to pay attention to is insulin. Get yourself insulin sensitive, and those hormones will all balance. An interesting example of this is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It is one of the biggest hormonal challenges for women, and it has an insulin resistant piece to it. If you get yourself insulin sensitive, you start to bring that testosterone load down. You start to balance those hormones. Same thing with infertility. We saw a lot of women got pregnant with using the principles of the fasting cycle in Fast Like a Girl, because we really worked on bringing insulin down. So now those sex hormones balance. Above insulin is cortisol. So it's just what I just said. You can't balance insulin if cortisol is hanging around all the time. So get yourself out of these cortisol rich states. And for some women specifically, this means you need to go handle some trauma. You might need to go and work on some things from the past that are bubbling up to the surface right now. It might mean you need to change a job. You might need to get out of a really stressful situation, but cortisol rich environment is absolutely going to make you insulin resistant. But at the top of the master hormone is oxytocin. So this fascinates me because oxytocin is the hormone of connection. And what we have in our world right now is a lot of disconnection mixed with a lot of toxicity and mixed with a metabolic challenge. So we can start to apply all the principles that you and I have been talking about today to improve our metabolic health, but we cannot leave out of the conversation how important it is to pause and to have positive connections in our life, to smile at people. If you're in the grocery store in line, if you're out shopping somewhere, how many times do you just ask the person that's helping you, how was your day? How are you doing today? Thank you for helping me. You don't have to have a ton of friends to get connection. You can smile at people. You can be grateful to people. You can hang out around positive environments and get it. You can get oxytocin from your animals. You can get oxytocin. You can give it to yourself by hugging yourself. There are lots of ways to get oxytocin, but it starts by understanding the importance of it. So this is why we try to create community in my online world, in my Reset Academy all the time. I'm we do community events, we do gratitude challenge. I'm always trying to bring people together to lift each other up. This is why oh my God, let's go back, Jesse, to the first part of this conversation in the health world. Not only are we confusing people, but now we're pointing fingers at everybody saying, you're right, you're wrong. We're pitting people against each other. This is not health. Health starts with oxytocin. Health starts with caring about other humans. Health starts about smiling and saying thank you and saying nice things to yourself. You start there and all other hormones are going to balance. But we have left oxytocin out of the health conversation. And we got to bring it back in. We got to bring more joy, more love, more gratitude, more grace for each other. We have to be willing to sit with somebody who doesn't agree with us and still love them anyways, not cut them out of our life because maybe they're going to vote for somebody different than we were going to vote for, or maybe they think different than we think. The more divisive we become, the more cortisol goes up, the more insulin resistant we become, the more hormone imbalances we have. So we are going to have to learn how to connect with one of each other and start to say nice things, whether we like each other or not. We have to learn to bring the smile back. We have to learn to bring laughter back. And now everything else will balance itself up, itself out. That's how powerful oxytocin is.
I love this. One of the challenges with something like this and adopting it within a healthy routine is the fact that it is so subjective. You can get to the end of your day, you can journal about all the foods you ate, when you exercised, when you broke your fast. There's a lot, what supplements, we could go on and on. There's a lot of objectives that are easy to check off a list and to make sure we're doing on a regular basis. This is a more soft, more nuanced approach to health and wellness. And it's hard to really determine when you deserve that check mark for the day, which makes it, I think, not that it takes away the importance. This is hugely important, but it makes it hard as something you're going to adopt.
Yeah, because it feels less tangible, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's part of it. Yeah, it's less tangible and it's hard to quantify, which I guess is the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's hard to quantify, but I guess I would flip it and ask yourself this. If you're doing all the right things for your metabolic health and you're not getting a result, then try kindness, try connection, try moving into a state of love and appreciation, gratitude, and now see if all those things work. So, you might have to go at it as your last resort, which wouldn't be my first choice, but to your point, if you can't, if it's hard to quantify, then that might be a different way of approaching it.
To bring it into an objective lens, is there any food supplements, and not to take away from what you said, that part is core and foundational, we need to do that, but things we can ingest or do to raise oxytocin along with living the way you described?
So it's a really good question. And I brought Dr. William Li onto my podcast, and we geeked out on 2 microbe strains. One is called Lactobacillus reuteri, and the other one is called Lactobacillus rhamnosus. And literally in the middle of the interview, I asked him, I was like, I think these 2 break down estrogen. I can't find any research on it. And he goes and he tries to, he starts Googling it. And we're now having this real-time conversation about these 2 strains of bacteria. And what he says in that moment to me is he's like, well, what I can tell you is that I know that those 2 strains of bacteria stimulate oxytocin production. In the gut, it climbs up the vagus nerve and goes up into the brain. So it has, like, the microbes have this stimulatory effect to oxytocin. So you get this oxytocin-rich experience in your brain. So now the 2 of us are like on Google trying to figure out what foods. And here's what couple that we came up with. Fermented yogurt. But it has to be fermented. It can't be like, you have to make sure some of the pasteurized yogurt, like you might have to make your own fermented yogurt because some of the pasteurized is dead food. So I know William Davis years ago had a recipe that was going around the internet. Do you remember that? It was like an L. reuteri yogurt.
Yeah, no, he's been on the show a couple times talking about that yogurt. And I thought it had a connection there to oxytocin. So I'm glad we came full circle with that.
You know what the other one was that Dr. Li and I unpacked in this interview? You can go listen to the interview on my podcast, was fermented sourdough bread. So it's really interesting, but those 2 strains of bacteria affect oxytocin as far as what I know right now. And those are the 2 foods that I know can upregulate those strains of bacteria so we get more oxytocin in the brain. But it leaves us with the conversation of, well, are there other foods? And now I'm going to need to go search that even more.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
If you're feeling more confused than ever, then let's just come back to some basic principles like these 5 foundational food ideas and learning how to fast. And you will see so much change.